I'm David Knowles, and this is Ukraine, the latest. Today, we discuss the latest updates from Ukraine, and we speak to journalist Farida Roustamova, who's been talking to members of Russia's elite, gauging attitudes to the war and Vladimir Putin's handling of it.
This hideous and barbaric venture of Vladimir Putin must end in failure.
Nobody's going to break us. We're strong. We're Ukrainians.
Every weekday afternoon, we sit down with leading journalists from the Telegraph's London newsroom and our teams reporting on the ground to bring you the latest news and analysis on the war in Ukraine. It's Thursday, the 6th of October, day 225. And today, I'm joined by Associate Editor Dominic Nichols, our Assistant Comment Editor Francis Durnley, and our guest, independent journalist Farida Roustamova. I started by asking Dom for the latest updates from the battlefront.
Afternoon, David. Hi, everybody. A lot of blasts last night in the city of Zaporizhzhia. So this is obviously in the south of the country. Zaporizhzhia, the city, is about 30 k's just northeast of the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant. That's slightly further south and west round. They're both on the Dnipro River, but the power plant is some distance away. So this is not an attack on the nuclear power plant, but an attack on the city. So far, reports that 2 civilians killed, 5 missing, a number of people pulled from the rubble, including a 3-year-old girl pulled alive from the rubble. The area is reported as being mostly residential and businesses. Seemingly no military target there whatsoever. Looks likely reported as the weapon used was S-300s, an S-300, which is primarily an air defence weapon, so to fire at aircraft, jets and helicopters and what have you. But it does have a secondary mode of the surface-to-surface role. However, in that mode, it is very, very inaccurate. It's not designed for that primarily. That is just, it's largely physics that, you launch something in the air, it's going to go bang where it lands. So the S-300 is not that accurate in its secondary mode, which this seems to. It doesn't sound as if they were firing at any part of the Ukrainian Air Force in the area. So it looks like it's, as we've seen recently with the massive degradation that Russia has suffered in its precision-guided munitions. They're now repurposing other weapons. And like I say, it will still go bang at the end of it. But if you repurpose weapons, so in this case, primarily a surface-to-air missile, we've seen anti-ship missiles repurposed and so on and so forth. If you use them for what they're not designed for necessarily, then they're not going to be anywhere near as accurate as they purport to be in their primary role. So this looks like it was just another casual use of violence by Russia against a largely residential area, killing civilians. This seems to be the only response they've got at the moment. They've not gone forward. I can't think of anywhere they've gone forward. It was a few weeks ago when we were saying they are still grinding forward at a kilometre a week, yada yada. We're not even saying that now. They don't seem to be going forward anywhere. This just seems to be the only response they can have against the Ukrainian advances. Speaking of which, elsewhere, Ukraine is still pushing into the Luhansk Oblast. So yesterday I made the point that we were talking about the pushing on from the Kharkiv front in the northeast of the country. They're now so far to the east that it's no longer appropriate, I don't think, that we talk about the Kharkiv front. Ukraine is over the border line and into Luhansk. Not in great numbers, not in great huge pieces of territory, but they are there. There seems to be no significant line of Russian defence. And the small towns, Revka and Makivka, which are they're just inside the Luhansk Oblast. They are 10 k's west of the main north-south road linking Svatove and Severodonetsk, Lysychansk, that area, so a big resupply route. These towns are, if this is representing where Ukraine have pushed, then this is a little way to the west still of that main supply route. But if they get that far, then the route down into Severodonetsk and the sister city right next door, just across the river, the Severodonetsk River of Lysychansk, they were looking extremely vulnerable. And then you're into Luhansk itself, the city of Luhansk. And of course, this is significant not only because it's maintaining that momentum, and it seems as if Russia have yet to coalesce around any form of geographic entity to hold a line of defence and start, as they would wish, to start pushing back. But of course it's particularly significant because it was only last week that Putin had his great rock and roll concert to annex territories and say everything's going swimmingly, and the first thing that happens is he lost the city of Liman, and now he's losing towns inside the Luhansk Oblast. So very, very significant there. Also Ukraine pushes in the south around Kherson. Fewer reports of that area, so I don't want to try and claim that they've made any further advances from that rather impressive advance in the last few days coming down the Dnipro River. But it is clear that there's still intense pressure on Russian forces in the Kherson area. And I'll pause there.
Thank you very much, Dom. Francis Sternley, there's been some political developments to the west in Europe. Can you take us through what's happening at this inaugural Prague summit?
Thanks, David. Yes, this is the inaugural meeting of 44 countries that will join the European Political Community, or the EPC as it's known. They're meeting in Prague as we speak, and our roving reporter and regular on this podcast, Joe Barnes, will be there. So keep an eye out on the website for reports from him, and I imagine we'll have him on the podcast perhaps tomorrow or early next week to talk about his findings. What is this? Well, it's the brainchild of French President Emmanuel Macron. It brings together the 27 member states of the European Union and 17 other countries, including several that are waiting to join the bloc, and the only one, of course, ever to leave it, which is the United Kingdom. The UK are said to have quite a prominent role in this. Whilst France is the architect, it's believed that the significant military role that Britain has played in the war in Ukraine will feed into its significance on what is a summit really where Ukraine and energy are its central thrust. And I'll just quote the British Prime Minister Liz Truss, because she's made some remarks prior to the meeting that have been released to the media. She said that she will be urging leaders to stand united in the face of Russian aggression as Europe faces, quote, its biggest crisis since the Second World War, close quote. She'll obviously also go on and talk about the importance of unity and resolve, as the politicians usually do. But she will also say, we must continue to stand firm to ensure that Ukraine wins this war, but also to deal with the strategic challenges that it has exposed. And as I say, the main focus of this summit is really these strategic challenges. They think there's going to be a lot of background discussions in relation to making sure that an energy cap is enforced, that I was talking about at length yesterday and the day before, this energy cap being vital to ensure that Russia doesn't profit from the extraordinary now high cost of Russian energy and energy more generally. So that being enforced not only within the EU but also more broadly and more widely is, I think, a paramount part of this. But the broader message, and this is, I think, the most significant part of it, is that whatever is concluded is secondary to its fundamental point, which is to show Russia and to show the world that there is a new order, a new defence order that is possible. Macron has said this, but also the main negotiator on behalf of the European Union is also there and has actually said that this will be a meeting that will help build a new order. Macron said, it doesn't mean we want to exclude Russia forever, but this Russia, Putin's Russia, does not have a seat. So, as I say, it's meeting as we speak. Nothing has come out of it yet, but the significance of this is very profound, and I think we can expect it to have quite a significant influence on the debates in the coming days and weeks as we look forward to what's taking place, not only on the battlefront, but in the political sphere.
Well, thank you, Dom, and thank you very much, Francis. Just before we invite our guest, Farida, to the chat, Francis and Dom, you both brought up this piece from Timothy Snyder, professor of history at Yale, who is responsible for some rather excellent YouTube videos and lectures on Ukrainian history. You both wanted to talk about this, and I think this might be a nice way to set up what we're going to speak about with Farida and the attitudes and opinions and thoughts of the Russian elite. So, Dom and Francis, would you take us through what does Timothy Snyder say? What is his argument?
Sure, well, I'll very quickly condense it, and then Dom, I'm sure, will have some deeper insights based on what Timothy is saying in terms of the military and political ramifications of this. But broadly speaking, his argument is that the earth is moving under Putin's feet as we speak. And I quote here, his political career has been based on using controlled media to transform foreign policy into soothing spectacle. In other words, regime survival has depended upon two premises. What happens on television is more important than what happens in reality, and what happens abroad is more important than what happens at home. It seems to me that these premises no longer hold. With mobilisation, the distinction between at home and abroad has been broken. With lost battles, the distinction between television and reality has been weakened. Reality is starting to matter more than television for the first time, and Russia will start to matter more than Ukraine. He then goes on in the piece to talk about prominent Russian political figures who are calling for further escalation of the war and who are mocking Russian high command. And he concludes by saying that as Ukraine continues to win battles, one reversal is accompanied by another. The televisual yields to the real, and the Ukrainian campaign yields to a struggle for power in Russia. In such a struggle, it makes no sense to have armed allies far away in Ukraine who might be more usefully deployed in Russia. Not necessarily in an armed conflict, although this cannot be ruled out entirely, but to deter others and protect oneself. For all of the actors concerned, it might be bad to lose in Ukraine, but it is worse to lose in Russia. If this is what is coming, Putin will need no excuse to pull out from Ukraine, since he will be doing so for his own political survival. For all of his personal attachment to his odd ideas about Ukraine, I take it that he is more attached to power. So very, very interesting analysis, and one, as I say, that I'm sure Dom has some more thoughts on.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a really interesting concept, boiled down to some central themes, and I don't think by boiling it down that he's glossed over any of the detail. I think it is fair to see it in this way. He's basically saying that as long as the war, in terms of in the eyes of the Russian people, as long as the war is over there and just about the military, Putin's fine. As soon as it comes here inside Russia and starts bleeding into politics, he's not fine. And Timothy Snyder makes the point that mobilisation was that moment of crossover, because mobilisation brought the issue inside Russia, and people started saying, "What? Hang on! I thought this was a special military run around the block. You're saying what? You need thousands more troops?" And so not only does it bring it home to them, but they started to take more of an interest, and then we started hearing of the defeats and the Russian, the ultra-nationalist blogger community that we've spoken about many times. They became more vocal, and so suddenly it started bleeding from just the heavy metal military game into politics. It came home with a vengeance, and Putin could no longer say, "Well, it's just over there. Trust what you see on the media," which of course he controls. And so it's a very interesting article. I recommend people go and have a look at Timothy Snyder's piece. He's a professor of history at Yale. He knows his onions, as I think I got criticised for the other day when I wasn't here. My back was turned. But anyway, he knows his stuff. Very interestingly, not only is it worth your time to read it and a few minutes reading it, but if we think about what's happened in the last couple of days, so Ramzan Kadyrov, the Chechen leader, apparently promoted to general yesterday. Putin has promoted him to general, and you've also got the Wagner Group under Yevgeny Prigozhin. Now, these are the Chechens under Kadyrov and Wagner Group under Prigozhin, private armies basically. And the questions, well, why haven't they been heavily committed? Why aren't they taking massive casualties? We know the Wagner Group is active around the city of Bakhmut, but it's not really doing much. Now, does that say that it's not using its most experienced troops? It's just using these guys it's recently taken out of the jails and what have you. Likewise, the Chechens, not really seen much of them. Where are they? What are they doing? So is Putin starting to think, hang on a second, I need a bit of an insurance policy here. I need to keep these guys sweet, need to keep them on side. Let's make Kadyrov a general, start looking more domestically, thinking about his own survival. In a kleptocratic state, I don't think there is such a thing as political ambition. There is only survival. So you've got these characters, Kadyrov and Prigozhin, who are thinking about their own survival, which sort of, for the moment, neatly coalesces around looking after Putin. And I just wonder if the war coming home to Putin means that he's not using these, let me say, more experienced troops to win the war. His mind's starting to think about winning his own survival, the elongation of his regime. And we saw last night footage of some Wagner Group people being very heavily arrested by we think Russian military people, or that there seems to be a bit of a power spat between Sergei Shoigu, the defense minister, Yevgeny Prigozhin, the head of the Wagner Group. So there seems to be some sort of internal power dynamics around here, which play exactly into what Timothy Snyder's saying. So all in all, very interesting piece, and with a very contemporary feel to it.
If I could just come back on one thing as well, I think it's worth commenting on the fact that his argument is a counter to the one that's quite commonly been made, that with the mobilisation and with the escalation of the war, that this will lead to a unification within Russian society amongst the elites and among the people as the existential threat, supposed existential threat, increases. This much more nuanced approach says that actually that is not the case. Now, I'm not arguing either way, which I think is more valid, but it's an interesting piece of analysis nonetheless. And as I say, I'd echo Dom that this is one that people are well worth reading on Timothy Snyder's Substack.
Well, thank you very much, Dom and Francis, for that. A theme listeners will have heard in all of that is this idea of what do the Russian elites think? What are they saying to each other? What are the opinions and thoughts behind closed doors? And we've got, I think, one of the best journalists to talk about that, Farida Roustamova. Farida, thank you so much for your time today. Would you just introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about some of the work you've been doing?
Thanks for having me. Well, I've been actually covering this whole thing about what Russian elites do think about what's going on around them and what Putin does to them too, actually, since the very beginning of the war. And my latest piece is kind of, a third part of my, I think I can call it already kind of research going on. So yeah, I think it's even though it is quite difficult now to, extract some genuine opinion from the people in power in Russia, the journalists who have been working for a long time and are familiar with some sources in Russia still manage to talk to the people from among Russian elites, and I'm one of them. Only one of them, actually. I have to point this out. There are many of my colleagues who do the same job, and I highly appreciate that. It's not an easiest one to do.
Well, thanks, Farida. So we saw an article you wrote about this on your wonderful Substack, Farid Daily, if people want to go and read that and follow Farida there. And it's now on the Telegraph site. Our headline is, Vladimir Putin is making rash and secretive decisions in the face of defeats, Kremlin insiders warn. So can you tell us roughly, who did you speak to and what were the big takeaways for you? What did you learn from what they said?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Well, at first, I would like to point out that the people we spoke to, I mean, me and my co-author, Maxim Davkailo, they are not from the military, or they're not someone among the heads of the law enforcement in Russia. We can call them, so these people, they are not so-called silovikis, and we can call them kind of civil elite. So these people are, they were carefully distilled for more than 20 years, and the key reason why they were able to build their careers and put in system is their loyalty and complete absence of their personal political ambition. So what these people are experiencing now is something reminiscent of that scene last on the 24th of February when the invasion began. After Putin declared mobilization, the war is no longer 1,000 kilometers away from Moscow, where most of members of the Russian elite live. Their relatives, friends, and colleagues are being called up and sent to the front. And Russian establishment basically is panicking and trying to save their loved ones and colleagues from the draft. And I think that this is the main shift in their mood since February. that the war is not a distant special military operation, so-called special military operation anymore. And it has come to Russia now, in a sense, and to their homes too.
You mentioned just then their loyalty and how these people are in the position they are because of their loyalty to Putin. Did you get the sense that that might be seeping away, that because of what's happened over the past 7 months, there's less loyalty to Putin now? Did you get that sense from your interviewees?
Well, I wouldn't say that. I mean, we cannot call this attitude, I mean, the current mood, some kind of cracks in the elite, I would call it, it's. I think it's a sign of their own kind of inner struggle and their own despair and learned helplessness. They realize that the civil elite, they realize that they cannot oppose to this. They simply don't have enough resources. Again, as I said, they were distilled, and the main criteria was that they cannot, organize among each other. They cannot build any structure, or I don't know, or even we can say that the criteria was that they are not able to organize any kind of coup. So I don't think that they can oppose inside of them. I mean, to those things that are happening, what Putin is doing, but they're not able to express it in any way. I think that even among each other, I don't think that they even discuss those questions among each other.
And can I ask, the headline of the piece for The Telegraph you've written is about Putin himself. Just to repeat it, he's making rash and secretive decisions in the face of defeats. Could you tell us a little bit more about that? What are your sources telling you about his state of mind and his behaviour?
So this decision of Putin's was unexpected to many people, but was kind of expected by Russian elite, but it was not desired, certainly. So the mobilization is an unpopular decision, not only among Russian population, but among elites too. And how my sources explain this decision, the decision to announce mobilization and to annex Ukrainian territories. The reason is that is Ukrainian, of course, at first Ukrainian counteroffensive. Putin cannot lose, so he needs to really urgently turn the situation around. And but at the same time, this decision is kind of in terms of his old profession. He used to be the FSB director. It's a KGB successor. It's kind of, and it's a new special operation. So the decision that is made very, so he did not aware anyone of it, and no one was prepared. And this is also a sign of a total lack of coordination. And my sources say that Putin tells everyone different things. So basically, there is no center of decision making. Yeah, and it's just a mess. And it's not only about some political decisions. It's about decisions on how to run the war. And nobody. One of my sources, he joked that nobody knows what Russian army, what we were doing in Kharkiv. No one has a clue. And I think that this is a very telling quote. For now, it's just it's another surprising move from Putin. Everyone's frustrated, but cannot do anything with it, just to obey, unfortunately.
You mentioned in your article that a few people had said that nobody really had any idea how this might end. Could you tell us a little bit more about that? What did they say about where they think this is going for them and for Russia itself?
Well, the main thing I noticed this time when I talk to my sources is that when I ask them how do they see the future and how do they think, right after Ukrainian counteroffensive, these thoughts actually came to mind of many people. What would happen if Russia lose? And many of them, they told me that they cannot imagine imagine this scenario. And those acquaintances of mine who support the war, they just simply keep repeating the propaganda narratives that the West wants to destroy Russia and the defeat in a war with Ukraine would mean Russia's demise. But nobody knows the Putin's strategy. Nobody knows his plan, if there is one. And that's another reason why nobody's able to describe any sort of, ending of everything, of this crazy war. And they can only perceive what Putin is doing without any dissent. But at the same time, that they feel the same uncertainty, feel the lack of experience, the lack of information and coordination. So no, there is no answer. There is no clear answer. I didn't hear any single clear answer to the question how this all is going to be finished. The only thing that I heard from my sources, from few of them, that they are only praying that the war is not going to go nuclear. Only praying, it says a lot.
Can I ask, when you're speaking to these people, do you get any sense of sympathy for what Ukrainians are going through during the invasion, or any sense of guilt at all?
Well, as I said, the key criteria for those people to be able to remain in the system is their loyalty. And the other thing is, a lack of reflection of what they do. Russian and Ukrainian people were historically close, and many of Russian people, including people from Russian elite, they do have relatives in Ukraine. They have their roots coming from Ukraine, but still, those who my acquaintances, some of them who actually don't support the war, but they are trying to convince themselves that they are doing the right thing, remaining in the system. They keep repeating those narratives about Nazis, about Ukrainians being traitors, and they are not our so-called brothers anymore, that they betrayed us, Russians. But the other thing is that the people who actually really oppose this war, at least among, while they're talking to me, is that they do realize what Russian army is doing in Ukraine, but they don't feel guilty for that. They blame Putin. They consider themselves as kind of hostages of the system, and they don't want to acknowledge this guilt. They blame Putin, just like many people in Russia too.
Farida, from what you've said, two big things are coming out to me. One is that it sounds as if lots of people that you speak to are sort of in denial because they recognise that it's going badly but don't know how it might end or where it's going. And also, in a political sense, it sounds from what people are telling you that the political operation in the Kremlin is a total mess. Are those two things fair?
Yes. I mean, this is exactly what is going on. I mean, it looks like there is some kind of order in the system, and that there is a plan, because that's what Putin keeps saying, and he tries to convince everyone that he has a plan and that everything is going according to a plan. But I mean, you probably have seen this on September 13th, when Putin invited members of Russian elite to the Kremlin to be the witnesses of the signing of those annexation treaties. There were many memes about it. The faces of the members of Russian elite, complete despair, and basically, they look like people who are awaiting some kind of catastrophe, and that's exactly what they feel. It was literally on their faces on that day.
Well, Farida, thank you so much for that. I thought that was an absolutely invaluable look inside how the Russian elites are thinking about the invasion and their attitudes to Putin. So thank you for taking us with you on your reporting. Dom and Francis, you've been listening to all of this. Do you have any questions?
I do, yes. Thank you so much, Farida. And I think your piece, as I said earlier in the week on the podcast, is among some of the most important that I've read recently about the war, and particularly on this uncertain question about the state of the Russian elite. So to echo what David was saying, I highly recommend that people read the piece who are listening to this. My question actually is a little moving away from the Russian elite, but you're obviously in a very unique position, because you're an ex-BBC journalist, you're somebody who is now independent and is talking to people in Russia, but you also see the Western media reporting on Ukraine, including us, of course. And I just wonder whether there's anything from that any observations you would make, perhaps anything that Western media is missing, anything Western media is perhaps doing better than Russian media. Just any observations you have on that would be really fascinating to hear.
Oh, that's an excellent question. Thank you for that. I mean, I would say that Western media and all the foreign media have a unique position right now, because you actually can keep distance from this conflict. I don't mean that you are, cold or non-sympathetic, but that you can be kind of, we'll keep this journalistic position more clear than Russian journalists, for example. Because us Russian journalists, we're finding ourselves in a very difficult position, because on the one hand, you have to stay objective, but it's so very hard in this conflict, because you are kind of part of it just because you're Russian, and it is true. And I think that the distance thank God that we have Western media covering this conflict, because otherwise I think we just wouldn't have any clear and unbiased judgment. Totally unbiased. Because, as I said, for Russian journalists, it's an extremely hard challenge right now to cover all the aspects of this conflict.
Thank you for that. And just one final question from me, if I may, which is relating to that. How much Western media do you think the average member of the Russian elite reads? And what do they read, if they do?
Well, I think that actually many members of Russian elite do read Western media. They do speak English, and they do read in English. You might have seen many interviews in, for example, British media or American media. Interviews with Russian oligarchs, or I don't know. One of the people who come to my mind right now, who speaks fluent English is Russian Prime Minister Mikhail Mishustin. And I'm absolutely sure that he knows, that he keeps reading the Western media when he has time, of course. I think that they actually, this double thinking is one of the reasons why they do read Western media. And also, the other reason is that they actually have to get some actual information somewhere. I mean, they cannot, they don't need to consume propaganda because they already know what they're telling there. I mean, the Putin's propagandists. But they need to get the real picture of what is going on in order to, at least in order to be able to save their money, for example, to be able to save their property, and to be generally aware of what's going on, to be able to care about their families too in these circumstances when they are all being sanctioned. So yeah, I mean, I'm absolutely sure that they reading and watching everything very carefully.
Farida, hi, it's Dom here. I wonder if I could jump in, please. It's absolutely fascinating. I'm really interested in your view on whether the elites you describe have the psychological scaffolding to contemplate and process defeat, because they won't have grown up in with the democratic sort of systems and understanding that we would recognise, and the sheer mental effort it must have taken them for their entire career, their lives, to survive in the system over there. So I just wonder if you would think, how was the defeat in Afghanistan perceived by these people? How was the 1991 coup perceived by these people? Are they ready to take on board the thinking about, or the effort about how to think about a defeat, let alone what to think about it and what to do about it? I mean, are they going to crumble? Are the institutions ready for what it might mean? I'm not counting any chickens about the possible outcome of this war, but I just wonder if the elites have ever had to contemplate an actual political and military defeat. Thanks.
Well, I think that they are ones who realize that Putin's propaganda machine is so very developed that it can literally make the win of basically anything. I mean, you already have seen that Russia actually, last week, Russia annexed the territories that it cannot actually control. And this is the thing that they can repeat this, reproduce that with at the moment when Putin will realize that he can announce that Russia had won this war and the war is over. I mean, it's just a fantasy, but I'm sure that it's one of the possible scenarios, and the people in the system do realize that. And the other important thing to know is that even though they do not consume propaganda so much, I mean, compared to general public in Russia, but still they have this, those narratives in their mind, because they keep, at least because Putin actually is reproducing them when he's talking to the civil servants. At least it's what my sources say, that they say that it is true. And I think that the other thing is, the other important thing is that they consider themselves and they consider Russia as the grand successors of the World War II victory. And they just keep, convincing themselves sometimes that they are the successors of that old heroic past, and they are trying not to. They're in denial. They try not to think of a possibility of the defeat, and I think that they do not. You mentioned the war in Afghanistan. I don't think that they even, I don't think that they consider this war as they have this magnificent skill of maneuvering and navigating everything that is inconvenient to them. So I'm not sure that they really actually have the reflections of the past.
Thank you. I've got just a couple more. One for me, and one that one of our listeners very kindly put into the chat bar on the Twitter space. We do read all the comments that go in there, and please do put comments and questions. And the question from the listener is: what's the motivation of these people to talk to you? Are they getting something out of the attention that you give them? Are they trying to clear their conscience? Just why do they feel the need to talk to you? And separately, and sort of slightly clunky and not very linked at all. My question: we talked about these arrests of the Wagner Group people in Moscow last night. I mean, do you think we would see any public displays of a power struggle inside the senior elites in the Kremlin, or is it just not going to be visible to the common man?
Well, answering to the first question, why do these people even talk to me? Well, the thing is that I mostly talk to the people who I know for a very long time. Those people are my old acquaintances, my old sources. And most of them, they don't have their own agenda that they need to push through the media. So I spent many years trying to build trust between us. So that's one of the reasons. And I think that the reason, the fact that they are talking to me, it's not a symptom of any cracks in the elite. I think it's more a sign of atomization, and they're in a struggle. And as you said, they're trying to clear their conscience too. So I think sometimes I'm actually kind of a therapist for them, and kind of a person who helps them to save the kind of attachment to the reality in a way, I think. So yeah, I mean, some of them, when I ask them why they do not quit and why do they stay in the system, they say that they think it can actually, the system can become worse for Russian citizens if they leave, because then someone will replace them, someone who can be worse than them, who will abuse power. And when I talk to them and I ask them why they do not move to a different country is another thing, that they say that it equals to suicide to them. So we are discussing this kind of questions too. And I think it's also some kind of, a telling thing about about me being kind of therapist. The second question, it was about the struggle between the Russian military command. I think that we can actually, the degree of the struggle is increasing. We can see that after the beginning of the mobilization, Putin he sacked one of the deputy ministers of defense. It happened on the second or the third day after he announced the mobilization. And I think that we can right now what is going on, this attacks from Kadyrov, from Yevgeny Prigozhin towards the heads of military command. I think that actually they will find in this continuing blame game, Putin will finally, I think there is a chance that Putin will finally choose someone among military command, on a higher level, that he would sack and make the guilty of in charge of all those defeats that Russian army is experiencing. But the other thing another important thing to keep in mind is that Putin is a person who he prefers not to change, as they say in Russian. I don't know if there's such saying in English. He prefers not to change horses during kind of crossing the river. So it's really hard to predict what he's gonna do with this ongoing blame game. But yeah, he's trying to carefully navigate through this dissent coming from his own people like Kadyrov, etc. But still, it's really hard for now to predict any consequences of this.
Thank you so much, Farida. Thank you, Dom and Francis, for your questions. We're coming to the end of our time today, so just one very quick question from me. Farida, Vladimir Putin has been in charge of Russia for decades now, really. Do you think that this is his weakest moment?
Well, I think that it is definitely one of his weakest moments, because I don't think that there is a single part of the society that is content right now. Including Russian elites. I don't think that anyone is happy about what is going on right now. And actually, that is one of the reasons for that escalation that is happening right now, from Russian side. So yeah, I would say that this moment is very, very difficult for him. And that's the reason why this moment is the most dangerous moment, actually. I don't want to, kind of be this most pessimistic person in the room, but I'm afraid I have to, because he does not have the skill of losing, and it's quite dangerous, I think.
Farida, is there anything we haven't asked you? Is there anything you think our listeners should know or understand?
I would only add that we should all carefully watch what is going on in Russian society right now, because, as we all know, Russian current regime is very strict towards the people who openly show their dissent. And still, we have seen quite many protests after the mobilization started in Dagestan, in Buryatia, and other Russian regions, who suffered from this draft the most. And I think it is quite an interesting thing to watch after right now, because many people are, kind of speculating about Russian separatism that can be caused by this war. I'm not sure about this. I wouldn't say that there are any signs of separatism, but I think it is very, very important and interesting to know how different Russian minorities, what is their perception of what's going on, and of this particular moment of mobilization when Putin is asking these people literally to sacrifice their lives. I mean, he didn't ask for this for 20 years, and this is the first time when the Russian government actually recruiting people actively to join them in any sort of, I'm sorry for this word, for any sort of activity, I'm not sure that we can call the war kind of activity, but I think that it's kind of mobilization against demobilization that was happening for 20 years. So it's a very interesting moment.
Well, thank you very, very much, Farida, for all of your time today and for answering all of our questions. We brought you on to give us that insight into what the Russian elite might be thinking, and I think it's been absolutely fascinating and revealing listening to you and listening to you talk about some of the conversations you've been having. Francis, I know you have one quick update on Elon Musk, and then I'll go to everybody's final thoughts, please.
Sure, thanks, David. Earlier this week, I spoke about Elon Musk's tweets on the issue of Ukraine. Now, as I said then, there's no reason to think that his analysis is any better than anyone else's, but I return to it now because there's been some updates in this space, because his arguments and the reaction to the arguments, I think, are indicative of broader debates that are currently taking place in Western media and amongst Western political elites. So I think they are worth returning to and discussing very briefly. So the senior United States Senator Lindsey Graham has commented in reaction to the statements put out by Elon Musk, who was calling for there to be legitimate referendums in the 4 annexed territories of Ukraine. And Lindsey Graham has said the following: "With all due respect to Elon Musk, and I do respect him, I would suggest he needs to understand the facts of the Russian invasion of Ukraine. Suggesting we end the invasion by simply giving Russia parts of the country after all the suffering is dumb. It is also an affront to the bravery of the Ukrainians fighting to defend their homeland. In 1994, through the Budapest Memorandum, Ukraine gave up its nuclear weapons arsenal, the third largest in the world, in return for assurances their territorial integrity would be protected. It was an agreement signed by Russia that included protecting Crimea and the Donbass as part of Ukraine. If you want peace in Ukraine, which we all do, simply demand Russian honour the boundaries they agreed to in 1994 and withdraw their forces. To do otherwise is to legitimise a bait and switch by Russia and a signal to other bad actors to take what you want by force. If Elon Musk and others want to continue the world to be in chaos, then by all means capitulate to Putin and reward his aggression." A very firm, robust, I think it's to say to Elon Musk. But Musk's reply, as I say, is also interesting because it underlines another trend of thinking. Quote, "Assuming you believe that the will of the people matters, we should, in any given conflict, support the will of those who live there. Most of Ukraine unequivocally wants to be part of Ukraine, but some eastern portions have Russian majorities and prefer Russia. Below is the electoral map of 2012. Blue is the pro-Russia party." And then there's a map which shows in large portions of Ukraine voting for more sympathetic to Russian parties. But of course, what Elon Musk misses, and this is what people have been saying in response to him, is it ignores the profound shifts that took place in the country after the annexation of Crimea in 2014. But even more profoundly than that, it ignores the shifts that took place following the invasion and the atrocities that have been committed since then. But even if it were true, of course, that there were large parts of the country that were leaning more towards Russia and wanting to belong to Russia, there are many reasons, of course, why people might vote for a pro-Russian party. It doesn't mean that they're necessarily wanting to join Russia. It might be a repudiation of the elite in Kyiv. It might be the candidates that have been put forward. It's complex. It's a complex, democracy always is. But this nuance that we, of course, try and do on this podcast is bring in and inject some of the nuances into this very, very complicated situation, seems to have been missed by Mr. Musk and is being missed by many commentators. So I just wanted to draw attention to it, not because I think Elon Musk is particularly the right person to be articulating this point of view that he is, but because he is engaged with such a complicated argument and one that ultimately we all should be engaging in, I thought it was right to raise it.
Well, thank you very much for that, Francis. Can I just ask Francis and Farida for your final thoughts? What will you be thinking of in the next few days, and what would you want our listeners to go away and consider?
Sure. Well, We've talked a lot about high military strategy and politics today, and I just wanted to return very briefly to the human tragedy of what's going on in Ukraine. We're hearing reports, not yet confirmed, but reports that Russian occupation authorities are planning to declare school holidays to begin today. That's being obviously the middle of the week, but it would continue until the 21st of October, supposedly to ensure security, with the plan being that Kherson school children will be evacuated to Crimea. Now, as I say, that is not confirmed, but there is speculation that will be the case. And if true, it just speaks again to the horrors that are taking place on the ground. Children taken away from their schools, denied learning. These are things that will have ramifications for years and years to come, personal tragedies as well as political ones. So I just wanted to draw attention to that human story today.
Thank you, Francis. And Farida, as our guest, would you like the very final words?
I just want to thank you for having me, and I want to share with you what I'm gonna follow carefully in the upcoming days. As all of you know, Russian authorities organized this annexation of Ukrainian territories, but the Ukrainian counteroffensive is continuing, and the Ukrainian army continues to regain their territories. And the most interesting thing that I'm following right now is that I wonder how Russian authorities will get out of a situation where they have no control over territory that they have claimed as their own. And it's sometimes it can be funny, to follow all those excuses that they are trying to push right now through the media. So yeah, I would highly recommend everyone to read those comments of Russian officials about the subject.
Well, thank you very, very much, Dominic Nichols, Francis Durnley and Farida Roustamova, our guests, for your time and your thoughts today. But just before I finish, Farida, if people listening today, if they want to follow you, want to follow your writings, where should they look and how do they follow you?
Well, my big articles are coming out on my Substack. It's called Farida. And I publish Russian and English versions of my articles there. And I also I have a Telegram channel. Telegram is a very popular messenger in Russia. I also have a Telegram channel that I would recommend to follow to those who can speak Russian a little. So yeah, please follow those channels. By following them, you're supporting my work. Thank you very much.
Ukraine the Latest is an original podcast from The Telegraph. To stay on top of all of our Ukraine news, analysis and dispatches from the ground, subscribe to The Telegraph. You can get your first 30 days completely free at telegraph.co.uk/audio. You can also listen to this conversation live at 1 p.m. each weekday on Twitter Spaces. Follow The Telegraph on Twitter to make sure you don't miss it. If you enjoyed this podcast, please consider following Ukraine the Latest on your preferred podcast app. And, if you have a moment, leave a review, as it helps others find the show. You can also get in touch directly to ask questions or give comments by emailing podcasts@telegraph.co.uk. We do read every message. And we're especially interested to hear where you're listening from around the world. Ukraine the Latest is produced by Louisa Wells, Giles Gear and Maddie Drury. And today on Twitter, Claire Hubble.